What is sync? We use the term sync to mean synchronize. Okay, so when you hear sync, from a music perspective, what you're really thinking is to synchronize music to another form of media. That is it. And usually that comes in the form of these 4 key areas: television commercials, film, television, computer games. Okay, so if you ever hear sync, if you're ever thinking about this idea of what does sync do, music supervision, all that sort of stuff, it is placing, it is synchronizing music, synchronizing songs, synchronizing recordings into other forms of media. And this comes in lots of shapes and sizes. Yeah, and it's continuing to expand with things like YouTube and user-generated content. Again, if a YouTuber wants to use a piece of music, they don't own that music, so they need to get permission to synchronize it to the content that they are creating. And that's where the whole world of music synchronization, where sync agents, where sync reps, and where music supervisors come in. Okay. Out of curiosity, let's talk about money, very, very early doors. If you were to get your music placed in one of these 4 areas, TV commercials, film, television, or computer games, where do you think the largest, the most money is going to come from?
Games.
So we've got games. Anybody think differently than games? Ads? Commercials? Why did you say commercials?
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere? Yeah?
They're like paid, like royalties, each song gets paid, you get paid.
Well, we'll come to that, but yes, you do.
It's repeated quite a lot.
The repetitions of it, potentially, yeah?
I heard the video game industry is now bigger than the film and TV industry combined.
It is, very much so. Does not necessarily mean that they pay the most money, it just means they make the most money. That's important. But yes, you're exactly right. Computer games industry, think about how much a computer game costs versus how much an album costs to buy. Yeah, you're paying like 50, 60 quid for one game. We don't even pay for music anymore. We pay to subscribe to access music, right? That's different business models, right? Advertising is where the money is at, right? And it's because it's marketing. It's because your music is being used to promote or to help promote something else. And that comes at a premium. Okay, so again, you can earn the same across all of these. The value of your music will rise and it will fall depending on everything else that you may be doing. But the largest, the quickest way of earning the largest amounts of money is by working within the world of advertising, branding, things like that. Out of curiosity, how many of you are artists? And how many of you are kind of more like producers, writers, behind the scenes sort of thing? Yeah? Okay, so about 50-50 split. Okay, so that side of things can come into play. If you are producer, writer, you're kind of, you are just up for writing songs, writing music, maybe composing scores, things like that. TV commercials, the more corporate world, it might feel a little bit more soulless, but it's usually where you get to the higher fees the fastest because they have the higher budgets. All right, just wanted to preface that. So there are 3 stages when it comes to synchronization. So if this is something that you are interested in doing, you're going to have to think about marketing and selling yourself. Yeah, so if you make music, you need to be self-promoting, you need to be marketing, you need to be going out there seeking business, making connections. It's a really, really important part of any of the creative elements of the music business. Sync is no exception. If you want to write scores for films, you need to go out and start meeting film directors and producers, because those are the people that are going to be deciding on who's making the music. And I would say at the level that you're at, meeting directors is the best place. They're a creative person. They're the creative looking after the visuals. They want to partner with a creative looking after the audio. All right. The next stage is the slightly more passive stage, which is the pitching stage. So there might be a case of people might be reaching out saying, we're looking for this type of music. Have you got anything? Okay, so if you've done a really great job at marketing and selling yourself, then you're on a list. You might get a bunch of emails, phone calls here, there. We're looking for someone to pitch some music. We're looking for music in your catalog already. Can you compose something directly for us for this? That's that stage. So that's very much more of the creation stage. And then lastly is the licensing. It's the paperwork. It's the contracts. It's something that if you are an independent and you don't have any representation, you obviously do need to start thinking about that, thinking about the paperwork side of things. More often than not, and this is where companies like Centric come in, is that there are businesses out there that can really, really help on that side of things. So this is always very much going to be up to you, unless you've got an agent, a representative. But the licensing thing can be something that you can offset to other people. Okay. So when we're thinking about the types of sync, then first of all, we've got to understand the music that we are making. Okay, so how much do we know about copyright? Not a lot, a little bit. How many of you class yourself as composers? Right, so why is it I'm not sure if I'm a composer or not?
We all technically composers because if we make music, you're a composer.
There we go, lovely stuff. Yeah, I'm guessing we've got a lot of sort of beat makers in the room, a lot of electronic music, that sort of thing. Yeah, a lot of people who make hip hop beats, dance music, that sort of thing. This idea of being a composer doesn't sit in the same way as if you sit down at a piano and write music.
No one here is solely a composer.
Right.
Our course just doesn't, like any of our courses just don't have the room for that because we're actually making the music and that's what we're handing in. But of course, if it's ours, if we're not just all working on other people's stuff, which some people work on a lot of other people's stuff.
Yeah.
But other than those situations, it's all ours. So I guess we all are
right.
composers in that way.
All of you should consider yourself as composers, right? If you might not be lyricists, but if you've made a song, and that song, even if it's kind of rhythm heavy, drum heavy, right? There's still a beat there. It's still part of a song. So if somebody else comes along and puts the top line over the top of it, that person doesn't then just take the whole song. Yeah, that's a co-composition between you as the producer, as essentially the music creator, and them as the top liner, the lyricist, the top line melody. Okay, so please consider yourself to be a composer in some way, shape, or form.
I know the rights of certain songs, particularly like back in the day, were very much based on the top line, who came up with the top line or the lyrics and stuff like this. Is there a big change, or has the industry accounted for a lot more instrumental music being used?
So a composition, the song, the underlying song, is still made up of the melody and the lyrics. Right, or the music and the lyrics, okay? You can get into the specifics and the semantics of, well, what is a melody? What is this, and all that sort of stuff. But I would always say that, obviously, what a song has evolved with
technology. Yeah,
with the technology, with the times, everything like that, yeah? Pop music is not the same as classical music, right? And pop music has evolved, and it doesn't have to have a piano in it. It doesn't have to have a certain set of instruments in it. The point being is that quite a few people who just make beats, you might be kind of selling those beats, and that's kind of a whole world that I try and urge people to say, well, think of those beats as the starting point, at least a piece of a song and don't necessarily just give them away or sell them before you've kind of really seen
The potential.
right the opportunities that are there for you. The reason why I asked whether or not you consider yourself composers is because when we are doing a sync, music can generate lots of different revenue streams. Okay, so whenever we are thinking about a song, we're looking at two elements of a song. Okay, we've got our composition, the underlying song, which is the melody and the lyrics. So that you can represent that via the sheet music. I'm using Hey Jude as an example here. And we've got the recording of the song. And they are separate copyrights that can be licensed separately, that can earn separate money. All right? So if a brand, if a film company, if a computer games manufacturer wants to license a piece of music, they need to license the underlying song and they need to license the recording of the song. And they are often completely separate. All right? If we use the Beatles as an example, so Lennon and McCartney wrote Hey Jude. They're represented by Sony Publishing. So the song is looked after by Sony. The record side, the recording of Hey Jude, is looked after by Universal, a completely separate entity, a completely separate company. So if Hey Jude is used in any form, in a film, in a TV show, in an advert, those people who are using it, they need to ask two completely separate companies for permission to use the song and the recording of that song. Now, sometimes it's all bundled together, but more often than not, they are separate.
And I've seen, especially like my family was watching The Traitors, you know that series?
Yes.
Oh goodness, I'm not a big fan. But anyway, neither here nor there. They often will take popular songs and they've obviously bought the copyright of the lyrics and the melody, and then they'll re-record it in a way that's fitting for the TV show or the segment. So they won't have they won't need to ask for the
original.
Well, the recordings rights. They'll just approach, like if they were using Hey Jude, which they wouldn't in the Traitors, but if they were using Hey Jude, they would go to Sony only and not Universal.
At that point, yes. So when you're using a re-record, and we can look back around to this a bit later on, but let's say you wanted to use a song. Traitors is a good example. Did anybody watch Westworld when it was on HBO? Do you remember that? Like the idea, it was set in the future, but in sort of like a weird, horrific theme park filled with robots that are in the Wild West, right? A big part of that TV show was using kind of modern songs, but that were reworked into kind of old-timey fashion. So they had like player pianos playing Rolling Stones songs and things like that. Same principle. Peaky Blinders. We watched Peaky Blinders as well. They did that as well. They had like well-known kind of up-to-date pop songs, but a kind of that had been Peaky Blinded up, right? So that's a, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't get up that. Is that interpolation? Is that what that is? I know like sometimes you can get around copyrights by re-recording.
So you don't necessarily get around them. So you wouldn't ever get around the composition copyright. So you're still in that sort of situation. You are going to the publisher, to the people who are looking after the songwriters' rights, saying, we would like to use the song. This is the context. This is the scene. This is how we're using it. Would you be up for us using it? And they say yes, and they might quote you. I'll come back to you in a minute. And but within that conversation, you'll be going, we don't want to use the original version of that song. We want to incorporate it into the score, or it needs to be a very particular sound. We want just a piano version. So it might be a case of saying, do you have a piano version of this? Or it'll be, can we make a piano version? Sure. And then you would then engage quite often a production company, and there are lots of production companies out there that specialize in basically making re-records of famous songs for sync. Yeah, so they're going, right, we want Hey Jude, but we want a cappella choir version of it, right? We can't find one that already exists. Let's find a production company that can set that whole thing up. They then own the recording, because that's how recording copyright works. If you pay for it, then you're the owners of it. So there is still a license, they're still asking permission. It's just permission from someone different than the original owner. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah?
And I guess as part of the contract, maybe the copyright company will maybe want to approve the recording that's been done.
Yep, you can do that. There's lots of that side of things. Also, depending on who owns the different rights will depend on whether or not they might charge more for it and things like that.
Yeah.
So I've done deals in the past where the songwriter also owns the master recordings and only ever allows anybody to use it if they're using the original master. And in the particular project we were doing, we didn't want it needed to be re-recorded as if it was being played in the advert by a dog. I'll leave that one hanging for you there. And so we had to pay a little bit more, a little bit extra, because they obviously weren't earning on both sides. So we were only paying for this side. They usually earn money on the license of the composition and the license of the master. They were losing out on the master, so we bumped up the amount of money that we were having to pay for the composition rights.
And what does the C and the P stand for?
So the C is copyright, composition copyright. The P stands for phonographic copyright. So phonogram recording.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you ever see P in a circle, that's what it's relating to. It's the copyright, the ownership of the rights within the recording. Yes.
If the original recording is like remastered and re-released, does that reset the copyright?
It creates a new one. Yeah, so as you can see at the bottom, I've added on here, and I'll make these slides available so you can gain access to them. But a composition remains in copyright and therefore monetizable for the life of the writer plus 70 years, whereas a recording is 70 years from when it's recorded. But whenever you remix, remaster, that creates a completely brand new copyright. Now that was normally happened when we changed formats. So if you had a song that was first recorded onto vinyl and then it was put onto cassette and then it was put onto CD, etc., 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 mini disc, blah, 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 you had new copyrights being made. In a digital world, you get a lot of, we're going to do a 10-year remix, remastered version. That's got a brand new copyright attached to it. If you wanted to make a track that had a sample of a song from, I don't know, Buddy Holly in it, for example, right? So Buddy Holly, artist in the 50s, died quite early on in the 50s. So actually, we're getting quite close to when Buddy Holly's songs could well be coming out of copyright. If you found original vinyl pressing of one of his songs from the 50s, that wouldn't be in copyright anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, at the back.
Some say that you need to like either email yourself your own songs or send them to yourself in the post.
Yep. Some might say.
I've heard that from multiple different.
So that's what you used to do. So back in, before email and before everything was digital, yes. Essentially, you don't have to register your songs for them to be your songs. Proof of ownership of copyright is automatic, or rather ownership of copyright is automatic. You write a song, you lay something down in a tangible form, you own it, right? Then it just comes down to proving that you own it, if you ever have to. And back in the day, when everything was analog, when you couldn't just record something on your phone and things like that, you tended to have to write it down, write the sheet music, write the tab, write the lyrics down, put them in an envelope, send it to yourself, and then not open it. Because the date stamp that the letter got when you sent it basically gave a kind of a proof of when it was made. if you're using Logic, it's all dated now, so you don't really need to do that. And if everything digital, if you're really worried, you can email it to yourself. There you go. There's the digital version of it. But most things now, especially when you're using that sort of tech, it's all got date stamps on it anyway. Make sure it's all backed up onto something separate than the computer that could be wiped, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, you don't really need to send it to yourself in 2025.